Charlie Kirk mean to you?
Charlie Kirk was a man who built his platform of having conversations with people he disagreed with. He went around the country knowing that university college campuses were hostile environments, and he did it anyway. He knew that the people he was speaking to, a lot of them hated him, and he pulled up a chair, he gave them a microphone, and he asked them to debate. He inspired millions of people in his mission to preserve the greatest culture the world has ever known, both in America and in Britain, because he understood that the great traditions that have made America the great country it is today were inherited from its father state, the United Kingdom. And as a British person, I'm very grateful for the work that he did towards the end of his life in talking about the free speech issues in the United Kingdom.
How's it made you feel, like seeing that kind of cold blood stuff on the online?
Scared. It could happen to me. I mean, obviously I don't have 5 million followers, but he was executed for saying his beliefs which I share. So who's to say that I could be next? And you know, the one person killed him, but tens of thousands more celebrated it. And that means there's tens of thousands more people out there on the streets, free people who believe that killing people for their views is okay.
Do you think it could lead to like a clash in societies in America and the UK?
It could. It could.
What made you travel all the way to the UK today?
Freedom of speech is definitely important, but for us it's Jesus Christ.
I want to say you that we're going to get rid of the curse and bring back the blessing to our nations, for our children's children. So right now, in the name of Jesus, secular humanism, I break your power right now. Rip it up, boys. In the name of Jesus, the Muslim Brotherhood, I break your spirit. Is the Islamic terrorist flag.
Oh man, what's happening all over the world is just chaotic, and probably because they don't have Jesus Christ in their life. And probably what we're seeing now is the dominating effect of the other religions.
How are you feeling about today?
It's the biggest protest in British history. It's got to send a message to the world. It's been going on for too long. This is the counter-revolution, right? But Charlie Kirk's life should inspire everyone with courage to speak up. That was what he wanted. He inspired a whole generation of young men in America. That's why they killed him. Christ is king. Well, you're going to hear that from millions today.
We turned our back on God. Charlie's voice has spoken loud and clear across the nations of this world that we must return back to the faith that built our nation strong. And that faith is Jesus Christ. As far as I'm concerned, there is no other God. All the gods of the nations are idols. But the Lord made the heavens. There is no other religions. There's only Jesus Christ and all the rest. This is a religious war. It's Jesus Christ versus Satan. Christianity versus the rest. Islam, Hinduism, Buddhism, whatever else you do, are all false religions. We've got to clean our countries up. We've got to get everything out that does not know or receive Jesus Christ. Ban any type of public expression in our Christian nations from other religions. Ban halal, ban burgers.
You see a renewed interest in the Christian faith at this time?
Yes, I do feel it is on the rise. Christianity is coming back, and it needs to for our country's future. We need to bring it back to Christianity, definitely.
Do you think that that's just in a cultural way, or do you think there's like real interest in the faith, like the gospel itself?
Cultural way, I feel. Yeah.
Okay, so you think more cultural than an actual dedicated faith in Christ?
No, both, yeah.
I am so encouraged by the fact that people will not lie down, they will not be quiet, as our as our nations are torn apart. We've got a target on our back now. So we want peace.
Do you think that there's a risk of like violence developing between like the two major worldviews right now in like the West?
Our worldview is predicated on violence.
Yeah.
It's predicated on peace and conversation.
Wow, look at all these people, folks. Incredible numbers here, and see all the flags and see a cross in the middle of the crowd over there. Obviously our hope in the middle of this is that people will turn to the gospel of Jesus Christ in repentance and faith, because that's the only solution to the direction of the nation ultimately. But it's obviously we don't want things to turn into chaos, but we do want people to be saved and to repent and believe the gospel, because ultimately, as we said in the other video, the only true hope we have is repentance, so that the nation might turn course back to Christ himself, not just cultural Christianity. So do you think that Jesus Christ is the answer to this chaos in the world?
I'm not a religious man, but what I can tell you is Jesus' message, the way he lived, everything about him, absolutely is a great, is the answer to this. If people acted, believed and spoke like Jesus and lived like Jesus did, there would be no wars, there would be no problems at all.
Yeah, that's certainly the hope I have of him returning, and then there will be no more war. But yeah, I'd just encourage you, for me in this time there's not a lot of hope in this world, and I just want to encourage you that Jesus brings that hope in his salvation when he died and rose again. So I want to bless you with that.
Thank you, mate, thank you.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
And because the country feels a bit like we're on a war footing now, of course it's a very different type of war. I do believe that it will see a lot more people turning to organised religion.
And Jesus
but of course
himself.
It has to be the right religion, doesn't it?
Because they were singing on there a song about Yeshua, Jesus, weren't they, just now?
Yeah, they were, and obviously there's the crosses out and forth that I was meeting earlier with a lot of the ministers who are here. And obviously I think Charlie Kirk's message too, which was very much faith-based, but I would argue I would argue a modern interpretation on it. So yeah, so I think this is a time that we'll see a lot more people turning to faith, because people are losing a lot of hope.
Yeah, I just encourage you. That's the peace that I have in these times, because in this world there's so much trouble, but the peace comes from believing in Jesus himself. And I just encourage you as well to carry on your search for the gospel of Jesus. And it's just incredible to see these things happen, and to me the Bible predicted these days as well. So.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Nice to meet you.
Welcome to the Shaw that explores the social dynamics and psychological forces that shape our world, much like the pecking order in a chicken coop. Why is society structured in rigid hierarchies? Why do we instinctively follow authority? And how is our belief in this structure manipulated to control us? We'll explore the layers of social conditioning, the psychology behind obedience, the hidden mind control techniques that influence our lives, and the universal moral laws that stand in stark contrast to manufactured authority. This is the Coop Files. Hello everyone, today's date is Thursday the 18th of September 2025. I'm feeling a little bit run down today, so please bear with us if I struggle a little bit. I'm not feeling my best, but I thought I would try and get this presentation out, move on to the next one. So I opened up the show there with some footage from last weekend's Unite the Kingdom March, which was a march of the right-wing political activists, led by the right-wing political activists, march around London, and it's estimated that there was anywhere between 500,000 and a couple of million people there. Obviously that's not what the media reported, but you know, they never tell the truth. And as you can see from the footage, now this is a pro-Israel march. Ultimately, the kind of figurehead is Stephen Yaxley Lennon, who is a state actor for Israel, funded by Israeli money, and is obviously pro-Israel. Where did all of the funding come for this march? Apparently, obviously, the whole thing was huge, and there was huge screens all the way along the route and all the rest of it. This is a huge event which took a huge amount of organisation, huge amount of funding, and I don't believe that one man did that on his own. So obviously you can come to your own conclusion on that, who's controlling it and where are they being led by the Pied Piper. You can see obviously the footage I chose there's a lot of religious Christianity narrative going on there. This is what's coming down the tracks, the rise of the Christian Reich. People are going to be embracing Christianity. There's going to be a resurgence of Christianity, and it's going to, obviously the political pendulum in this country is going to swing from the radical left to the, generally speaking, quite far right, through nationalism and Christianity. And this is the start of it. This is the start of the social engineering to funnel everybody who's is somewhat right leaning in their politics, even though they probably would have been left not long ago. It's going to funnel them into this way of thinking, embrace Christianity, as long as it's the right religion. Did you hear that? As long as it's the right religion. And obviously have more controls, more protection of the borders and all of the other things that they harp on about. But all that's happening is they're just being corralled to buy into the system and beg for another leader. Was it Albert Pike that said, if the opposition want a leader, we shall provide him. And that leader will be somebody like Nigel Farage. And then Farage will come in when the time's right and promote all of the things that you should reject, but these people will lap it up because they'll see him as a saviour figure. Things like digital ID and a technocracy, And what I also find interesting is the last video I did was on the the idea of materialism versus religion, and how it's kind of just a divide in the mind. And isn't it strange how these communists on the left are ultra materialistic, and their god is government, is authority, is the state, is a totalitarian regime. And then on the right, they're starting to embrace religion, and all of the mind control that goes with that, all of the moral relativism that goes with religion, and they're that's the right versus left, complete materialism versus religion, exactly how I put it across in the last presentation. And one, it's not a coincidence that it's like the brain. The people are divided, left and right is divided as if the brain was divided. So on the left, you've got the complete snowflakes nanny state who want open borders, and we pay for everything. Everybody's welcome here. Everybody's allowed to dip into the purse and have freebies, and like it's just a jolly holiday. That level of socialism on an international level, which is what communism is. And that's like, it's like a nurturing mother. That's what they would do. A nurturing mother would let everybody into her home. Back in the day, all the children come play around here. I'll cook for them, I'll bake for them, I'll look after them, and I'll mother them. And it's like the state's version of a mothering parent. It wants to mother all of the kids. And on the right, it's the protector. It's the father figure, the protector, who wants to keep the door locked and not known. I'm here to look after the family and protect the family, and nobody comes in this house without my say so, and I'm the bread earner, and I've got the means to protect this family. And a little bit more protective. Father figure's more protective, mother figure's more nurturing and more open, I suppose. That's what the state is, because they've set it up like that on purpose, because people are so infantile. They do subconsciously see the state as a parent, and it just swings from mom to dad, from mom to dad, from mom to dad, and that's all the system is. Ultimately, it's set up like that. That's why there's only two. It's your two parents. That's why there's two parties in all of these types of systems. So you've got they call themselves the patriarchs, patriots, because they want the state to be more patriarchal. The father figure. The counter protest on Saturday was the neo-feminist women against fascism or something. I can't remember what it was called. Women, anti-racist women or some nonsense. Neo-feminists who turned up, and they were the counter protest, and there you go, there's the matriarch on the other side. It's so blatantly obvious. So these people who are marching thinking they're going to make a change, embracing Christianity, just embracing another religion, just like government is a religion, there's religion on both sides. It's communists versus Nazis. The communists on the left, international socialism, and on the right, national socialism. They're all socialists at the end of the day. They all believe ultimately in the state, and that's why it's all just a game. It's just a game. Farage will come in with the new Christian Reich, and the first thing they'll be doing is trying to solve these problems that they've created themselves, like immigration, digital ID. The solution will be digital ID, and they'll just lap it up. They're not bothered. They don't look that far ahead. These people, they're just, yeah, they've got genuine concerns, and they're just trying to have a voice, but they're lost. They're just walking around the streets of London, lost. That's all I see them as. They're just looking for another saviour. The problem lies within ourselves and our inability to see that government is illegitimate, democracy is illegitimate, government is just another form of slavery, taxation is just another form of slavery, and that we don't need these institutions, and that we need to actually just grow up. And the first thing we've got to do is stop. It's what we've got to stop doing. Stop believing in authority, in the religion of authority. Get out of our cult. Understand objective morality. Didn't hear anybody talking about objective morality. And, you know, the fact that if we're not moral, then we deserve to be in the situation we're in. That it's as simple as that. You can't be a moral civilization and be controlled and abused and have such little freedom if we were a truly objectively moral society. That's all the solution is. Just understand that and stop believing in authority. Stop voting. Stop thinking a saviour's coming. Stop thinking that man-made laws are going to solve all the problems. Stop doing jobs which support the slave masters. Stop lying to yourself that it's the solutions. Stop lying to yourself that the solutions lie anywhere else. So all of the usual mainstream alternative media pundits there, this is just the mainstream alternative media to just funnel us down this dark alley, which is just going to end up with the exact same outcomes, just more removal of rights, more slavery, more surveillance. It's not going to lead anywhere good, unfortunately. Obviously the Charlie Kirk event, PSYOP, whether blood was shed or not, obviously the timing is very convenient, isn't it, on the eve of the new solar calendar. Out with the old, in with the new, represents a turning point, and I think it will represent a turning point to help usher in the Christian Reich. Whether the event was real or not is not something I'm going to say too much on, but it's certainly being used to usher in the Christian Reich, and that's the PSYOP bit. So the usual housework. Housekeeping, housework. I might make a few stupid slips like that. My brain is not fully switched on today, given I'm not feeling my best. So who's the show for? It's for me. It's easier to tell you who the show's not for. It's not for the statists, those who love the state, unwavering support for their own slavery, the conformists, those who go along to get along. They definitely think that's a mushroom, but since nobody else is saying it, no, I must be wrong. I don't trust myself. The conformists, the authoritarians, those that love authority, they love their religion, they love rules, and they love enforcing them on other people, and they love seeing other people suffer because they're so self-loathing. The atheist, left-brainers, those who believe in the religion of scientism, fake, institutionalized, government-funded scientism, the atheists, completely arrogant, closed-minded. I won't believe it. I don't care what you say. I'm not going to open my mind because I can't open my mind. I'm incapable of opening my mind. The emotionally and spiritually immature and the thin-skinned, like children crying like little babies because you're telling them something that might go against their own beliefs, and they're just not going to believe it. They're just going to cry like a baby if you keep trying to push and trying to get them to see the light and the truth of the matter and the logic and the common sense. They're just so thin-skinned you can't speak to them. Those opposed to the truth, who enjoy their comfort, they'd just rather be sitting on the sofa watching Netflix or watching 11 fucking grown men play children's games, kicking a football around a grass field. That's what they do with their Saturday. That's their tribal mentality. That's how they get rid of all of the masculine energy, by shouting at their fellow man. And they don't care about the truth. They enjoy their comfort. They enjoy the little bit of freedom that they get on a weekend. And how do they spend it? Sitting down watching Netflix or shouting at their fellow man at some fucking children's game. The self-loathing. Those who are so self-loathing, so egotistical, have such little self-respect. They can't even understand anything that you might say that goes against their own ego, because they hate themselves so much that they can't even begin to accept that they actually might be wrong on something. They love being wrong. Well, the ego thinks it's right, but they love being, when I say they love being wrong, they just love disagreeing with you. That's it. The self-loathing. So I came across this quote just a couple of days ago, which I thought was quite apt, quite timely. The death of truth is the ultimate victory of evil. When truth leaves us, when we let it slip away, when it is ripped from our hands, we become vulnerable to the appetite of whatever monster screams the loudest. Now, I thought that was really apt because of the events of the weekend, this blind march around London. Nobody's talking about the truth. Nobody's actually questioning whether or not government is legitimate and objective morality, and why we're in the mess we're in, and how we actually get out of it. Nobody's actually looking at solutions and the truth of the problem, and all that happens is it's just we are left with whichever monster screams the loudest. The communists on the left or the National Socialists on the right. That's it. Never a truer word has been said. Mon Mothma, revolutionary leader of the Rebel Alliance. So today's presentation, who's controlling your mind? Why are people so vulnerable to mind control? What is it that's going on? And who is controlling their mind? So we're going to look at the triune brain for this presentation, which consists of the lizard brain, the mammal brain, and the human brain. Paul MacLean's triune brain, which is sometimes known as the three-brain theory, has been very popular for years for grouping various regions of the brain into different groups that, as this neuroscientist proposed, perform different tasks. A fascinating framework for understanding the complexities of the human brain and its functioning. This model proposes that the human brain consists of three distinct regions, each with its own evolutionary history, functions and influences on behaviour. The idea that three different brainstem systems live in the human brain with their own operating logic, and that each of them has appeared in our evolutionary line sequentially, one on top of the other. The model puts forward the idea that three brains would be relatively independent and that they would relate to each other following a hierarchy, like a chicken coop, depending on their age and the importance of their functions for our survival. The reptilian complex, for example, being the first to appear, would be the structure that carries out the most basic and most important functions to survive in the here and now, while the neocortex, being the structure that appeared most recently in Homo sapiens, would be the one in charge of the most refined and complex functions. The logic that follows is that each new part maintains relative independence from the other, although they affect each other. MacLean also recalls the idea that the emotional and the rational are part of two diametrically opposed psychological dimensions, and that where there is one, the other does not fit. So the emotional and the rational, let's remember that. The emotional and the rational, when you're leading with your emotions and thinking with your emotions, you can't possibly be thinking rationally. Each of these brains plays a different role in how we process information, form relationships and respond to our environment. While modern neuroscience has identified that these areas are more interconnected than initially believed, the triune brain remains a powerful framework to understand psychological behaviour, emotional reaction, and even conflict within ourselves. The reptilian brain, the brainstem and basic ganglia. The most ancient part of our brain, responsible for autonomic and instinctual functions. This brain evolved more than 500 million years ago and is shared by reptiles, which is how it got its name. Core functions, basic survival instincts, fight and flight, fight or flight, freeze, territorial behaviour, habits and compulsive routines, aggression and dominance, reproductive instincts, heartbeat, respiration, digestion. So straight away you can see what sort of behaviours and traits come out of this part of the brain. The most least evolved part of the brain. It's pure Neanderthalism. Bear with me. When someone feels threatened, the reptilian brain takes over almost instantly. It bypasses reasoning and emotion to activate automatic behaviours meant to protect us or keep us safe, such as running from danger or preparing for a fight. This is also the part of the brain that governs repetitive routines, rituals, and even addiction. How many people do you know that just do the same thing day in, day out, day in, day out, day in, day out? No spontaneity in their life. As an example, if someone cuts you off in traffic, before you can process what happened logically or emotionally, your reptilian brain flares up, increasing your heart rate and possibly triggering anger or a reflexive gesture. This is your ancient survival circuitry doing its job. Excuse me. The reptilian brain is responsible for regulating essential functions such as breathing, heart rate, and basic survival instincts. It governs instinctual behaviours associated with survival and self-preservation, the first tenet of Satanism, self-preservation, ego thinking, reptilian thinking, cold-blooded. Another way of describing the most primitive and basic instincts is the 4 F's: fighting, fleeing, feeding, and mating. I think you know what the fourth F was there. According to McLean, the areas of the reptilian brain were related to the stereotyped and predictable behaviours that, according to him, define poorly evolved vertebrate animals such as reptiles. Poorly evolved. It makes so much sense now when you realise how many people you know who behave in this manner: fighting, fleeing, feeding, mating. That's all they're interested in. Primitive, unevolved. This structure would be limited to making simple and impulsive behaviours appear, like rituals that are always repeated in the same way depending on the psychological states of the organism: fear, hunger, anger. It can be understood as part of the nervous system that is limited to executing genetically programmed codes when the right conditions are met. Fear, hunger, anger. Again, how many people do you know where that is really their basic survival instincts is based around fear, hunger, anger? The limbic system, or the mammalian brain, located above the reptilian brain. The limbic system emerged in early mammals. This brain gives rise to emotion, memory, and social bonding. It includes important structures such, It includes important structures such as the amygdala, hippocampus, hypothalamus, and thalamus. Core functions: emotional processing, the processing of your actual emotions, fear, joy, sadness, anger. Attachment and relationships, motivation and reward. Long-term memory storage, hormonal responses via the hypothalamus, stress and arousal regulation. The limbic system adds emotional colour to the experiences. It helps us remember the past, feel empathy, seek love and avoid pain. This is also the part of the brain that reacts powerfully to threats or rewards, especially when connected to past trauma or pleasurable memory. So it reacts to threats and rewards. And this is the whole, the reward, the idea of being given rewards, like Pavlov's dogs. You can train somebody to just react to a reward and behave in a certain way. We saw that during the 2020 PSYOP, where the whole 2020, the lockups that they did, the whole thing was, it was in and out, in and out, in and out, or in tiers, out of tiers, tier 1, 2, 3, out of lockdown, into lockdown. It was all threats and rewards. Do this and you get a reward. Do that and you get more suffering. It's threats and rewards, playing on people's emotions, putting them into ego survival mode through trauma. And then when that trauma is obviously it's not dealt with by an individual, then you can just sort of reenact the behaviours by bringing up the trauma, doing something that reminds the person of that trauma. They'll just act in a certain way. This is trauma-based mind control. When we experience strong emotions, whether it's the warmth of a hug or the anxiety of rejection, it's the limbic system that's most active. As an example, if you've ever felt a knot in your stomach from heartbreak or tears come to your eyes without warning during a song, that's your limbic brain reacting. It bridges your experiences to emotional meaning. The limbic system comprises structures such as the amygdala, hippocampus and hypothalamus, collectively known as the emotional brain, evolving from the brains of early mammals. The limbic system plays a central role in processing emotions, forming memories and regulating physiological responses to stress. It's intricately involved in various aspects of social behaviour, attachment and emotional processing, shaping our subjects' experiences and interpersonal interactions. Attachment. How many people are just, they can't remove themselves from a situation, whether it be a relationship, a friendship, employment, the government. They are so attached even though they know it's wrong for them. Emotional processing and shaping our subjective experiences. The limbic system, which according to MacLean appeared with the most primitive mammals and on the basis of the reptilian complex, was presented as a structure responsible for the appearance of the emotions associated with each of the experiences that are lived. Its usefulness has to do with learning. If a behaviour produces pleasant emotions, we will tend to repeat it or try to change our environment so that it occurs again. While if it produces pain, we will remember that experience and avoid having to experience it again. Thus, this component would have a fundamental role in processes such as classical conditioning or operant conditioning. So this is again playing on your emotions to give you the pleasant outcomes, or to give you the perception that if you behave in a certain way you'll have a pleasant outcome. Again, that was a huge thing used during the 2020 PSYOP. If you behave in this way, you won't, kill Granny. If you take your experimental poison under your skin, then you'll have a positive experience. It's just pure manipulation, mind control, playing on your emotions and conditioning you to do something that you wouldn't ordinarily do. Nobody would do that. Nobody would do that if I just went up to somebody in the street and said, do you want this poison injected under your skin? Being conditioned. Thirdly, the neocortex, or the human brain. The neocortex is the most recent evolutionary addition to the brain and is uniquely developed in humans. It is the seat of consciousness, allowing for complex thought, language, imagination, moral reasoning, and problem solving. It wraps around both the limbic and reptilian brain and includes the prefrontal cortex, which is essential for executive functions like planning, attention, judgment and decision making. Core functions: language, symbolic communication, abstract thought and analysis, moral and ethical reasoning, logic and rational decision making, conscious awareness and reflection, empathy and future planning. Just looking at some of those examples there. Attention, none of that today. Making sound judgment, none of that. Solid decision making, none of that. Planning, none of that. Abstract thought and analysis, nope. Morality and ethics, nope. Common sense, doesn't appear to be. Conscious awareness and reflection. In order to reflect, there is definitely no conscious awareness. People are unconscious, walking around like zombies. Reflection, to be able to look in the mirror, you need to be happy with what you see. So even if you just think about it on the physical plane, nobody is going to look in the mirror if they hate themselves, if they hate what they see. It's the same internally. Nobody is going to look at themselves, their own behaviours, how their behaviours affect each other, whether they've got morality, whether they've got ethics. Nobody's going to self-reflect and question themselves if they hate themselves, self-loathing, because they have no self-worth. That's why this part of the brain is not functioning. Empathy and future planning, there is no empathy. There is no empathy. I mean, I'm lost for words. So when it comes to empathy, I cannot, even just as a side anecdote, I cannot even convince a very close family member that their behaviour is detrimental and adversely affecting somebody else in the family, even though I'm laying it out piece by piece, all of the evidence, all of the facts, I still cannot get that person to empathise and to actually take responsibility for their own actions and their own behaviours. I can't do it. And that is not unique. This problem, if just try it out, just try and hold somebody account for something they've said or done, some sort of behaviour which is unethical or immoral or harmful to somebody else, even if it's just something they've said. Watch them avoid taking any responsibility and any accountability instantly, straight into the reptile brain. Defense. They're under attack. They think that because you're calling out the fact that they've done something wrong, that's some sort of personal attack on them, because they don't have any conscious awareness. They think they are their ego. They think that's them. They have no awareness of the true self. You can't have inward reflection, self-reflection, if there is no self there, no conscious self. They think they are their ego. They think that reptile inside their brain, inside their mind, they think that's them. They have no empathy. The reptile doesn't have empathy. You can't reason with a crocodile, with a predator. You can't have a rational discussion and debate with a predator, with a crocodile. You can't get it to see the error of its own ways. A predator, you can't have a relationship with a predator. They will never, ever, ever be wrong. They have no empathy. So the neocortex allows us to pause, think and evaluate rather than acting purely on impulse or emotion. It's like what I say, the housekeeping at the top of every presentation, acting on emotion. People who are so easily offended because what they've heard sparks some sort of emotional reaction, like they just don't like what you've said. It offends them. It goes against their values. It might put a chink in their little ego, and because that ego is so fragile, they impulsively react. And then things like people who just make impulsive decisions, they don't stop to think about anything. You can see this in simple terms. You can see this in people who make impulse purchases when they go shopping, come back with a load of shit that they don't need because their brains aren't working properly. That's why. It's simple as that. Do you need it? Are you actually thinking forward, planning, thinking, why do I need this? What use is it going to be to us in the future? How is it going to change my life? Do I really need it? What will my financial situation, how will it affect my financial situation? Planning forward with that question as well. And these people can't think because their brains aren't working. This is people think when they've got friends or family members or whatever, and they just laugh at them, they're impulsive, they'll just buy any old shit. And they'll probably hoard as well, they'll probably hoard it because they're convinced themselves that it'll come in useful for some time in the future, and they end up with a house full of shit. and they just think this is some sort of, oh, it's just quirky, it's the way they are. It's not their brains are fucked. The brains don't work. And obviously we're conditioned like this to consume. That's how consumerism works. Keep us thinking with our emotions, our mammalian brain and our ego. I want that, I want that, I want that. Oh, that'll make us feel nice. That's how the advertising industry is set up. That's how it manipulates you. That's how your government controls your mind. Mind control. That's how they control your mind, playing on your emotions. You can see these people a mile off. If they're going to make impulsive decisions in that area of their life, they're going to make impulsive decisions in that area of their life. And they are so easily controllable because they never pause to think about it and evaluate it, actually gather some information and actually just come to a conclusion that is their own, not somebody else's. They're lazy because that part of the brain, the neocortex, the thinking brain, the rational brain, it hasn't worked for so long, not fully, hasn't been fully firing on all cylinders for so long that it's hard work to use it. It would be like if you found a 20-year-old car, 30-year-old car in a barn on a farm somewhere. It's covered in dust. It's got no fuel. The pistons haven't ran for ages. The tyres are flat. It would take a lot of work to get that engine going again, get that car back on the road and get it functioning correctly and economically. That's what these people's brains are like. It's like calcified. Their brains are calcified. They haven't used them for that long. It's like putting a pound of toothpaste, a big pound weight of toothpaste in the baking sun for 50 years, and it would be so hard and unbreakable. That's what their brains are like, completely calcified. It can be done. It can start to use their actual human brain again, if they want to, if they recognise that there's a problem. So, example of I think I've given some examples. The one I had noted was you're in an argument with somebody. The reptile urges you to yell. The mammal wants to cry or shut down. But Neo helps you take a breath, assess the consequences, and respond thoughtfully. He asks, is this helpful? Is there another way to solve this? And that's it. It's not even rocket science. How many people can do that? How many people can do that? I would say very, 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 very few. When you're in an argument, it is either yell. What was that quote at the beginning? Whichever monster screams the loudest. The reptile wants to shout you down, and the mammal wants to cry to shut you down. And these are the two responses of completely unhinged and completely imbalanced creatures. They're not humans because the human brain isn't functioning. They're not humans. And you get people who are so emotional, don't you, that every now and again you come across people who are just, I mean, I've called them again at the top of the show, just crybabies. But especially when they've had a drink, it seems to release all of this ridiculous emotion. Have you ever come across people that when they've had a few drinks that they're just bawl their eyes out all of a sudden for no reason. But they're the sort of people who you can't have a conversation with them because their feelings just get so hurt, and they'll just start to cry, or they'll just start to shout at you, and they just want to win. It's all just about winning because the ego wants to win. The ego doesn't care if it's right. The ego is never wrong. So when I say it doesn't care if it's right, it doesn't care if it's the truth or not. It just wants to be right. It just wants to feel like it's right. It'll shut everybody else down. The conversation, the debate, the arguments will go no further, and the ego crawls back into its little hole, safe in the knowledge that it's right. That's what it thinks. It's complete arrogance. Learns nothing because the ego thinks it knows everything. Take a step back, take a breath, and say to yourself, is this helpful? Is there another way to solve this? But you know what the problem is? There is another way to... No, it's not helpful arguing like that. Is there another way to solve it? Yes, there is. It's called rational conversations, rational debates, using common sense and logic, and actually having respect and fucking listening to somebody else's opinion, and actually letting it actually be processed in your toothpaste fucking brain. But no, that's you can't do that with people because they don't have the mental capacity to have an actual debate. They haven't got the attention span. We've covered the attention span. They haven't got it. With some people, I cannot even get past the first sentence if I try and enter a conversation, enter a topic of debate that a group of people might be having. One sentence, I cannot get my first sentence out. So I would need to turn into a yeller. I would need to engage my reptile brain to even have a chance at partaking in this conversation or debate, and I can't be bothered because it's pointless. Because once you're at that level of consciousness, base ego consciousness, you can't win anyway because that's where they are. You can't solve a problem in the same level of consciousness that created the problem. These people, that's the level that they operate. You can't go down to their level and convince them that they might actually be wrong. You can't. They've got to raise themselves out of that level of consciousness into the human brain, have some self-awareness, have some self-reflection, actually have some fucking self-worth, and then you might get somewhere. Hard work. The thinking brain is the most recently evolved and distinctly human part of the brain. It encompasses the cerebral cortex, responsible for higher order cognitive functions such as reasoning, language, decision making, complex problem solving. The neocortex enables humans to engage in abstract thinking, planning for the future, and executing sophisticated behaviours, distinguishing us from other species and underpinning our capacity for culture and civilization. Our capacity for culture and civilization. But no, most people are just, like I say, they are not distinct from other species within the animal kingdom. They are like animals, territorial, repetitive, unsophisticated, go round and round and round in circles, expect something new to happen, something different to happen, do the same thing over and over and over again. They're insane. They've lost their mind. They actually see humanity as just some sort of, you know, another animal. See humans as just another animal. Well, they are just another animal. Proper humans aren't. Humans that can actually think. Well, you know, that's why they're happy to murder babies. That's why they're happy to euthanize people. That's why they compare euthanizing a fucking human being to putting a dog out of its misery, because they think we're fucking dogs. That's how simplistic their thinking is. That's how retarded they are. That's how satanic they are. That's how unevolved they are. They think it's as simple as that. Where you put a dog down, you may as well put a human down. Yeah. I tell you why you put dogs down. I tell you why they put dogs down. Because they can't be fucking arsed to nurse them to their final days. That's why they do it. They can't be bothered to pay the fucking vet bills, and they can't be bothered to nurse the dog through its final days. That's why they put them down. It's not to alleviate their suffering. There might be some odd, you know, on the odd occasion where that happens, but no, it's when the scales are tipped that this animal in the house is not worth it anymore. It's not worth the money, and it's not worth my time and attention. And I'm not getting anything back off it. It's not giving us attention, and it's not giving us the feed that I need. So I'm just going to kill it. That's why they put dogs down. People, these animal people. And now they're just going to put humans down. Oh, he's become a burden. He's become a burden. Yeah, your Uncle Tom. Should we just kill him? Aye, let's do a pro and con. Let's do a list. You do the pros, I'll do the cons. We'll balance it up, and then we'll just kill him. Aye, good idea. And then convince yourself that you've done it for his good. There are ways to nurse people through their final moments, days, whatever. Yes, there are extreme circumstances, but we're not talking about the extreme. Anyway, I digress. Right, what was I talking about? Abstract thinking and sophisticated behaviours. So for MacLean, the neocortex was the most recent evolutionary milestone in the development of our brain. In this complex structure resided the ability to learn all of the nuances of reality and draw up the most complicated and original plans and strategies. If the reptilian complex was based on the repetition of processes entirely due to biology itself, the neocortex was permeable to all kinds of subtleties coming from the environment and the analysis of our own actions. In this context, the neocortex could be considered the seat of rationality in our nervous system, since it allows us the emergence of systematic and logical thinking, which exists independently of the emotions and behaviours programmed by our genetics or programmed by our own environment. The seat of rationality. And I've come across some of the most, in terms of intellect, left brain egghead intellect, which is really just memory. I've come across people with a lot of intellect, old friends, I'm going to use as an example, a lot of highly intellectual, no emotional intelligence, no common sense, no rationality. And when you propose something to them, the logic, it's not real logic, it's logic that fits their worldview. I.e., it's not logic. It's just something, it's just sort of biases that sound logical, but they're not logical, they just fit their own narrative. So, we mentioned abstract thinking. Uses. Thinking critically. Describing something with a metaphor. Again, that's something else which personally I do a lot, and people they just don't get it. You can tell they don't get it. They do not get it. When you talk about something figuratively, again, lost on people. Creative solutions to a problem. No, people just want everything in black and white. They just want the path of least resistance. That's what you normally find with solving problems. People just want the path of least resistance. Analysing a situation. Notice relationships or patterns. Form a theory about why something happens. Oh, so you're actually thinking critically. If you're speculating and actually have a theory on something, you might actually be using the human brain. No wonder they don't want people theorising. Research suggests that abstract thinking plays a role in the actions that people take. Abstract thinkers might be more likely to engage in risky behaviours, such as not conforming with the crowd or taking government-approved shots of poison. Is that abstract thinking? Is that risky behaviours? Well, it was at the time, wasn't it? Risky going against the crowd, risky not conforming, risky not taking your poison because it was safe and effective. Where concrete thinkers, so that's the opposite to abstract, concrete thinkers are more likely to avoid risks and feel safe and comfortable within their tribe, never growing or evolving. Concrete thinkers. Concrete, very heavy, isn't it? Very base consciousness, very reptilian, just basic fight or flight, survival, the 4 Fs. Feeling safe and comfortable. I'm not taking any risks. I'll just do what the government says. Risky behaviours could also just be, have an ambition, speculating to accumulate. Obviously, the risk, you've got to weigh up the risk. You not just kamikaze. When you connect ideas, so again, abstract thinking. When you connect ideas, see beyond the obvious and imagine hypothetical scenarios, you're using a skill known as abstract thinking or abstract reasoning. It involves the ability to understand and think about complex concepts that, while real, are not tied to concrete experiences, objects, people, or situations. So you notice straight away you're using your imagination, something else which is dumbed out of people, dulled out of people through the school system and all of the other trauma-based institutions that we have to go through. So see beyond the obvious. It helps you see beyond the obvious and imagine hypothetical scenarios. So that's what when you're decision making, It doesn't matter what decision you're making in life, you're imagining the hypothetical scenarios, the different outcomes of the decision that you're pondering in the moment. And if that's what you do, I do that all of the time. And throughout my life, it's always been said to us, you think too much. You think, well, you don't fucking think enough. How can I think too much? You're thinking too much about it. Well, I'm thinking beyond the obvious. And yeah, sometimes you can get a little bit bogged down. Sometimes you could actually be thinking too much about it. But it depends, obviously, on what the decision is. But you know, you're putting lots of complex concepts into all of these different scenarios, and to see how they'll play out. And that's all that happened in 2020 with the people that didn't conform. They just saw beyond the obvious. The obvious was what we were being told was the obvious. Saw beyond that and imagined hypothetical scenarios. Obviously, you know, imagining hypothetical scenarios is not just being away in cloud cuckoo land. It's about gathering as much information as you can. Look for the information that you're not being given, and then put that into your imagined scenarios for the future. Make the right decision. And then if you make the wrong decision, and you learn by it, but at least make a decision that you've made. So this is all considered a type of higher order thinking. It involves ideas and principles that are often symbolic or hypothetical. This type of thinking is more complex than the type of thinking that is centered on memorizing and recalling information and facts. So what did I say earlier? Memory and recall, that is, these days, that is defined as being clever. It's just a memory test, being able to recall information. This is not what this is. It's obviously higher order thinking involving ideas and principles that are often symbolic or hypothetical. So you can take principles, and once you've got a good understanding of a certain set of principles, then you can use that understanding and symbolically or hypothetically apply those principles to any given problem or any given scenario. And that's how true intelligence works. People should just be able to be given a certain set of principles on any, like I say, any given subject, and they should be able to pick them up and run with them, and then be able to figure everything out themselves. So, you know, the principles of morality. You know, don't do anything which causes any harm to any other being, and understand what harm is, and don't do it. Don't carry out any actions which initiate harm. And everything else is your right. That's what your rights are. Anything else. And you should be able to pick those principles up and run with them. They're the first principles of life, of morality, of actually freedom, and actually being able to enjoy the experience which is called, you know, life. It's not just about memorizing and recalling information, but that's what the Soviet school system does. Memorize and recall. I don't care what questions you've got. I don't care what you think. Memorize and recall. Memorize and recall. Stand-up comedians, for example, use abstract thinking when they observe absurd or illogical behaviour in our world. Psychologists use it when they come up with theories as to why people act the way they do. So even what I'm doing now is actually abstract thinking. I've just taken some basic principles of these psychological or these behavioural traits of these parts of the brain, and I'm just using abstract thinking to apply it to what's going on in the fucking world around us. It's hypothetical. I'm using my imagination. I'm coming up with some theories and some scenarios, and then putting them out into the world, and then see if that plays out. See if my theory is proved correct. Scientific method. Test it. Does it come back with the results you expected? Go out, speak to people. Try and gauge whether or not they've actually got a human brain. You use abstract thinking when you're in a philosophy class, or when you're contemplating what would be the most ethical way to conduct your business. You write a poem or an essay, you're also using abstract thinking. So again, it's the creative side as well. It gives the balance of the logic and the creative side. If your human brain is actually functioning properly and well balanced, it is obviously part of your creative side as well. With all of these examples, theoretical and intangible concepts are translated into a joke, a decision, or a piece of art. You'll notice that creativity and abstract thinking go hand in hand, as I've said. Abstract thinking versus concrete thinking. One way of understanding abstract thinking is to compare it with concrete thinking. Concrete thinking, aka concrete reasoning, is tied to specific experiences or objects that can be observed directly. Research indicates that concrete thinkers tend to concentrate more on the procedures for performing a task, whereas abstract thinkers are more concerned with the reasons why a task should be done. So, back to the Soviet education system. What are children conditioned not to do? Ask why. Don't ask why, just memorize, recall. Don't ask why. So, I say this in the workplace, you're not allowed to ask why. People aren't, again, they're conditioned not to question authority, not to question why we do things. And we've got what concrete methods and what concrete processes, let's just get on with it. I'm going to perform the task, you perform yours, shut up and be a good little boy, sit down and get on with it. We should be asking why. Why do I have government? Why do we need them? Why do we need to be a slave just to function as some in any resemblance of society, of some sort of civilization? It's not civil, it's slavery. Why do we need governments? Why do we need taxation? Why do we need all of these institutions? Why do we need huge corporations? Why do we need man's law? Why do we need the media? Why do we need, the list goes on. Keep asking why. You actually need both types of thinking to come up with effective solutions. Absolutely. There's always a balance in everything. You need to be able to lay down the procedures for performing a task, as well as coming up with the you know, the solutions to the actual problem by questioning it in the first place. Abstract thinking becomes more apparent in the formal operational stage of cognitive development, which typically begins around the age 12. Excuse me. Oh, excuse me. So abstract thinking becomes more apparent in the formal operational stage of cognitive development, which begins around the age 12. Around the age of 12. At this age, children become more skilled at thinking about things from another person's perspective, imagination, empathy. They are also better able to mentally manipulate abstract ideas and notice patterns and relationships between these concepts. So they become actual thinkers if they've gotten through the Soviet school system in one piece mentally. So the fact that they're, to the degree that they can still actually ask the question why, and they haven't been completely traumatized and completely turned into a little communist through the uniform conformity education of no independence, no critical thinking, no abstract thinking, and no actual sense of self-worth. None of those things are nurtured in the Soviet school system that we have. So the age of 12 is interesting. I'm going to come back to that later. Obviously, this is when they hit their teens, adolescence, hormones, all sorts of other things, and it's a key stage. And so I've got a 15-year-old daughter who I believe is developing well in this region. Definitely got morality. I'm not saying she's got a total grasp of the principles and concepts, but she definitely honours morality. She can definitely reason, and you know, she can think outside of the box. Excuse me again. And what I find interesting is she's 15 and she's definitely more mature and grown up than a lot of adults that I know, or that I used to know, family members. Literally can't think like her, are not as well developed in the mind. They are all of the things, they are all of the reptilian and the mammal brain. You know, that behaviour oozes out of these people, friends, family members, people around where I live, where I socialise. They clearly did not develop beyond the age of 12. So it's not an exaggeration to say that these people are children. It's not an exaggeration to say they've got arrested development. It's not an exaggeration to say that my daughter is more mature and more grown up. Some uses of abstract thinking. Actually, I've covered uses, haven't I? So I found this interesting. A study shows that individuals who know that they will be exposed to trauma due to past experiences, remember I spoke about traumas which are unhealed, so they're in the past and they've never actually healed the wounds. So individuals who know that they will be exposed to trauma due to past experiences can adopt potentially protective cognitive strategies. One cognitive strategy linked to better mood and recovery from upsetting events is concrete information processing. Conversely, abstract information processing is linked to the development of anxiety and depression. So let's just go through that again. It's a lot to take in, that paragraph. People who've been traumatized in the past as a protective mechanism to make sure they feel nice and maintain a better mood, because they don't want to feel pain and they don't want to actually deal with the renewed upset. So people with past traumas who don't want to recover, don't want to actually really recover, develop concrete information processing. So remember that link to trauma, and that came out of a study. Conversely, abstract information processing is linked to the development of anxiety and depression. Now, obviously, there can be a lot of things linked to the development of anxiety and depression, but I can quite well understand that, because when you are constantly thinking about the future and every decision that you make and all of the evil and trauma that's going on in the world, and you can kind of see where it's going, and you become fearful and you develop anxiety and depression. And obviously I can imagine, even just on a personal level, people who are constantly trying to, it's almost like perfectionism when you're thinking that much. You know, going back to what I said before, people have often said you think too much. If you do think a lot and you use abstract thinking on every decision that you make, I can imagine it does cause you a bit of anxiety. Obviously the key is to recognise when you're just deciding what restaurant to go to, whether you want Italian food or Indian food. You don't really need to put that much thought into it. So the kind of takeaway from this study was that concrete processing led to fewer intrusive memories than abstract processing. Concrete processing led to reduction severity of PTSD symptoms compared to that of abstract processing. Concrete processing led to lower emotional reactivity to a subsequent stimulus relative to abstract processing. So the conditioned people, in order to avoid having to avoid dealing with past traumas, will quite happily think in a way which is beneficial to their own, their own sort of health, if you like, their own mental health, and to avoid having an emotional reaction to something in the now which is familiar to the trauma from the past. They'll process it in this concrete way, so they don't deal with it, so they don't have to deal with it. it says in the study that it's this way of thinking, this protective way of thinking, concrete information processing, it says in the study that it's a strategy linked to better mood. Yeah, but you're lying to yourself. That's what I would put there. You're not in a better mood. You've locked that trauma away, not to come out, and you're just kidding yourself that you're dealing with it. And so this is a strategy to have a better mood and recovery from upsetting events, but you're not recovering. You are not recovering from it if you don't actually look it straight in the face for what it was. Most people lock trauma away and they don't actually deal with it. And I would say that this is a way of hiding that trauma, so it doesn't have to be dealt with, because dealing with it would be painful. Just like any trauma is painful to deal with. So yeah, I thought that was interesting. Sophisticated behaviours. Again, something else linked with the human brain. People who work to become more psychologically sophisticated improve their odds for both well-being and success. Understanding how your mind works in a more nuanced fashion makes it a lot easier to manage difficult moods and emotions in a healthy, balanced way. And if you can do that, success and happiness often are not far behind. So, metacognition. You are aware of the fact that you're thinking things and able to assess the quality and usefulness of that thinking. For example, psychologically unsophisticated people often say things like, "I just got so worried and I couldn't stop thinking of all the bad things that might happen, and before I knew it I was in the middle of a panic attack." Again, it's not useful, and it's not of a good quality, those types of thoughts. So again, you're raising the quality of your thoughts. Metacognition. Remember that, raising the quality of your thoughts and being aware that you're thinking things. So your awareness is above thinking. Thinking, the things that you think and the thoughts that you have enter your mind, but you're just aware of them. Well, where is the awareness? It's above that. Awareness is above your thoughts. Most people think they are their thoughts. Again, we'll come back to that. They think they are their thoughts. Self-compassion. Psychologically sophisticated people are able to be compassionate with themselves when they fail or make mistakes, rather than beating themselves up. So again, most people will avoid even trying because they're cowards, because they're scared of failing, and they have no self-compassion. Why the hell would you be scared of yourself? Self-compassion just means that if you treat yourself like you would treat a good friend. So if a friend is going to mock you and ridicule you if you make a mistake, that would create fear. You would be scared to try because they're going to mock you and ridicule you. Why? So going back to what I just said, why would you be scared of yourself? Because you're an idiot. Because your brain isn't functioning properly. Being skeptical of your thoughts. Psychologically sophisticated people understand that their thoughts are not always to be trusted, because remember, your thoughts aren't you. You are your awareness. You are aware of the thoughts. Don't necessarily always trust your thoughts. Don't just trust the first thing that comes into your mind, especially if it feels nice, especially if it just, yeah, it's that must be the right answer because it feels nice. Stop for a moment, think about what it is that your thoughts are actually telling you and should they be trusted. Self-destructive behaviour would come into that category, I would say. People who aren't sceptical of their thoughts. For another thing, thoughts don't always mean something. Many thoughts are simply random, but it's dangerous to overinterpret them and start acting as if they're always significant. All sorts of weird thoughts pop into mind while we dream, but we don't make major decisions based on them. It shouldn't be any different in the waking life. Daydreaming? What do you think of when you daydream? Another reason to be skeptical of your thoughts is that thoughts can easily become habitual. If you grow up with abusive, violent parents, you might understandably develop a habit of thinking through the worst case scenario on your way home from school. But once you're 35 years old and more in control of your life, this habit of immediately thinking the worst might not be either realistic or helpful. So I said they're abusive, violent parents, but abusive doesn't have to be physical violence. It can be emotionally abusive. Emotional neglect is a form of abuse. So when you're a child, you can be forgiven for thinking, having that negative mindset where your thoughts are, generally speaking, worst case scenario thoughts. People do get trapped in these unhelpful, unrealistic ways of thinking, and I think there's more emotional neglect and emotional abuse goes on in dysfunctional families than what most people are willing to even consider, let alone accept. Just because a thought is the first to show up doesn't mean it's more legitimate than any other thought. If a thought doesn't match up with reality, there's nothing wrong with simply disregarding it. How many people have thoughts which are they just seem like they're completely delusional, and it's all just a protection mechanism, so it doesn't shatter their own version of reality, the matrix that they're caught up in, the mind matrix that they believe. They've bought the lie of what reality is, and you cannot shatter that. They can't disregard that. That's the thoughts that they were brought up on. That's the information that was given to them. That's what they think, and nobody else can change their mind. Your government is required. Taxation is legitimate, not theft, and we should be slaves. They can't part with that thought because that thought was given to them. That belief was given to them when they were a child. That's their belief system. That's their religion. Accepting your emotions. So you can't directly control your emotions. You can't simply turn down your anger any more than you can turn down your sadness or turn up your happiness. Rather, we can only influence our emotions indirectly via how we choose to think and behave. It doesn't make any sense to try and control your emotions, judge yourself for them, or expect them to be anything other than exactly what they are. Instead, the most realistic approach to any kind of emotion, including painful ones, is to be validating and accepting of them. So obviously if you're having regular problems with anger, and you've clearly got anger issues, and you're getting angry at the most insignificant things, then that's a different thing. Obviously you can't turn it up or down. It's got to be dealt with. The core problem, the root cause, has got to be dealt with. But generally speaking, if you're going to function as a normal human being, you've got to understand and accept your emotions, and when they come, just be aware of them. Again, your emotions aren't you. How many people think their emotions are them? I'm angry, I'm sad. No, you're not. You're not. You are experiencing anger, you are experiencing sadness. You are the awareness above that. You are the conscious awareness above that. And just be validating and accepting of them. Don't act on them. And going back to the childhood abuse or childhood neglect, emotional neglect, which is just the same thing, abuse. Validating and accepting a child's emotions is part of that neglect. That's part of your responsibility. If you were an actual mature, fully functioning human adult, then you would be validating and accepting of your child's emotions. But instead, you don't know how to deal with it, because you don't even know how to deal with your own. You don't know how to deal with your own. So how the hell do you know how to deal with a child's? Well, you are a child. It's like children bringing up children. We know how that's going to end, don't we? It's going to end up with lots and lots of retarded adults with arrested development. Never evolved beyond the age of 12. That's what we're going to end up with if so-called parents aren't validating and accepting of their own children's emotions, because they're not equipped to deal with it. There is no huge massive secret to parenting. You don't need a manual. What you need stability. You need the basic physical protections: food, home, clothing, safety. And then you need emotional and spiritual development, which is validating and accepting child's emotions and reacting to them in the appropriate way. So when they're bawling their eyes out and they're clearly in distress, don't fucking leave them at the child trauma centre just so you can have a £60,000, £70,000 fucking car, right? Look after your own child. Be there, be present, consistency. Validate their emotions and teach them to accept them themselves. Turn them into a fully functioning, conscious human being. Well, no, you can't, because you can't do that because you're not that. And you're completely controlled in your thinking, controlled by whoever gives you your mindset, handed to you on a plate by the controllers, because you don't even know what your emotions mean. taking responsibility for your actions. This is like, it's like I'm teaching a child. But unfortunately, this is completely lost on people. Going back to the family anecdote that I spoke about earlier, I cannot get this family member to take responsibility for their actions or for what they've said. Are you going to own what you've said? If I believe I've said it. If I believe you've said it. You either fucking said it or you haven't. It's got nothing to do with belief. This is what people are like. This goes on all around. All around. People do not want to take responsibility for their actions. I've seen this pattern. Family, friends, work. Psychologically sophisticated people take responsibility for the things that really are under their control. Their fucking actions. What differentiates psychologically sophisticated people is that they know that mere understanding this concept isn't enough. They know that they must remind themselves of it regularly and practice the skill of taking responsibility. So you're constantly thinking about it, you're constantly having empathy, you're constantly thinking how your actions and behaviours impact on others, and you're aware, you're self-aware, you're aware of your surroundings, and you think it's a practice and a skill. And you say this to people. Do you take responsibility? Do you understand the concept of taking responsibility for your actions? And do you take? Yes, yes, yes. Because they know it, but they don't know it. Or they know it and they don't understand it. They don't stand under that law, if you like. They just do not want to because they're children, because they haven't gotten past the age of 12. Children are not psychologically sophisticated. Children under the age of 12. So think about it. Think about that. Knowing the difference between short-term desires and long-term values, aspirations, speaks for itself, really, doesn't it? I want that. Impulse. Desire that will make us feel good in the now, and they're never thinking about the long term. They're never thinking about long-term aspirations. They're never forward planning to the point of thinking about the future, having actual values and aspirations in life. They just have short-term desires. Yeah, speaks for itself. Asking for help when you need it. This is a good one. Psychologically sophisticated people are humble enough to accept when they don't know it all and can't control everything. We all have areas in our lives where the emotionally mature thing to do is own up to our lack of control and seek help. But this requires the humility and courage. Courage, remember that word. The humility and courage to tolerate our helplessness and fear, because even though it's hard, we know deep down it's the right thing to do. Courage is doing something when you know it's hard but you know it's right. That's courage. And being humble enough to accept that you don't know it all, because people in the ego, people in the mammalian reptile function modality, they think they know everything because they think they are their ego, and they think they are their thoughts and their emotions, and their ego thinks it's right. Some information comes in, they have an emotional response. That must be wrong because I'm having an emotional response, and that's like how children think. That's what children do, literally, under the age of 12. And they think they know it all, and they think they have got control of everything in their lives because they're arrogant. You haven't got control of everything. Asking for help. This is I'm just trying to gather my thoughts. This is something I've experienced so much. It's so infuriating, where people, I might have a certain expertise in a certain area. Everybody should, be at your job, whatever you do for a living, right? So if you're a professional, you should have a level of expertise in a certain area, and you're applying it to your employment. And I come across people where they won't even ask for help. They won't even accept help, even though I have the expertise. And let alone when they've heard something on the fucking idiot box, spoken by some expert or some talking head, and then you try and tell them something different, they don't want to know. Because they've got the answer. You can't teach them anything. They do not need your help, because they think they know it all. But it takes humility and courage to tolerate your own helplessness or your own non-perfection, for want of a better word, your own vulnerabilities. The idea that you're not perfect. It takes courage to just say to somebody, do you know this? Do you know what the answer to this is? Can you help? What's your opinion? I might have it wrong. And to even just not asking for help with actual sort of like trivial problems. People go through life come across many what you would call trivial problems, but that they could ask for help, but they'll not, because they're egotistical. The ego doesn't want help. I've seen people, you try and give them a hand to help them out from a seat or out of a car or something like that. Just somebody who could benefit from a hand, like an older person. And no, they don't want you. They don't want your hand. I'm all right. I'm all right. I'm all right. No, I'm all right. I'm all right. I'm all right. Don't need your help. We call it stubbornness. It's that children, we need to stop giving it we need to stop giving it names which make it sound like just part of normal human behaviour, normal mature human behaviour, or that he's just stubborn. No, they're children. They've got arrested development, self-awareness. People who are genuinely sophisticated have a deep understanding of themselves. They know their strengths, their weaknesses, and they are comfortable with who they are. These individuals understand their effect on others and adjust their behaviour accordingly. Self-awareness is vital for emotional intelligence, and emotional intelligence is often what separates the truly classy from those who simply pretend to be. So the high intellect, successful, materialistic Satanist with a satanic mindset, with no self-awareness, no morality, but with lots of material wealth. They're pretending to be sophisticated. True sophistication comes from emotional intelligence and being self-aware, and actually knowing, as I've said, knowing your strengths, knowing your weaknesses, being able to ask for help, comfortable with who you are. These egotistical people, they are not comfortable with who they are. They are insecure. So self-aware people with emotional intelligence are secure within themselves. Certainly secure within their own meat suit, in their own body, because they know that that is not them. They know that their ego is not them. They know that their thoughts and their emotions is not them. They know that they are awareness. Self-awareness. You're aware of yourself because you are not the meat suit, the mind, the thoughts, the emotions. You are the awareness or the spirit that's overseeing everything. Mindful listening. It's just fucking listening, isn't it? It's not rocket science. Don't look at your phone or the childish football on the television. Absorb the words, consider them carefully, and then respond in a thoughtful and meaningful way. But no, people can't do that, can they? Because all they're doing is they're staring, gazing into your eyes, pondering what they're going to say next. And then what they say next doesn't have any relevance to what you've just said. The only thing it follows on from, so they've said something, you've said something, and then they said something. So that second thing that they said should have some sort of relevance to what you've just said, but it doesn't. It only has relevance to that first thing they said, i.e. they're just ignoring you. They're not actually listening to what you're saying. It's mindful listening is part of obviously being a human. And then when you're finished listening, actually fucking retort to what they've said, which demonstrates that you've listened. But no, everybody's just waiting for what they want to say. Showing an open-minded interest in different perspectives and experiences. Open-mindedness doesn't come from the ego, doesn't come from the emotions. It comes from the human brain. Show interest in different perspectives and experiences. Again, see this so much. Nobody's interested in my perspective. Nobody's interested in my experiences. They're just interested in fucking speaking about their own perspectives and their own experiences. Because they're children. Discretion in conversation. Fully conscious, remember, fully conscious. Individuals know when to speak, what to say, and more importantly, what not to say. They understand the value of discretion and choose their words with care. Again, care. The vast majority of people do not care what words they say and how they will land. Now, there's balance. You don't intentionally say things to hurt people. You don't intentionally, or even through sheer ignorance and a lack of any sort of self-awareness, say things that are hurtful. There are some things which are truthful that must be said, and it might hurt people. That's fine, because it's the truth. Sometimes the truth hurts. But it's the way that you say it. It's the words that you choose. In a world where oversharing has become the norm, particularly in social media, discretion stands out as a sign of sophistication and class. You're telling me there is not much sophistication and class in the cesspit which is social media. It's about being respectful of others' boundaries and understanding that not everything needs to be said, unless it's to call out, like I said, call out bullshit. It's boundaries. Again, These people have no boundaries. They have no personal boundaries. They share all sorts of shit on social media. They don't care what they share as long as they're getting likes, as long as they're getting feed and attention. So they've got no boundaries. So they're not going to have any respect for your boundaries, which is an essential part of growing and raising your own inner development as a person. You've got to have boundaries, and you've got to surround yourself with people who respect them. But people like, they love drama, they love gossip. That's their feed. People, people with higher thinking and who are fully operational in the human brain, they don't need drama, they don't need gossip, because they are content, they are secure. People who love gossip and love drama, they love other people's gossip and other people's drama because it makes them feel better. They're constantly judging other people, and it just makes them feel superior because they're insecure, self-loathing, and they need external feed to make themselves feel better. These are the asleep majority, the unconscious majority that we have to live with, who are sleepwalking us into tyranny. Because they are so concerned with their own superficialness that they have no empathy, and they can't, they're just totally closed-minded and obsessed with their own, how they look on social media and what material gains they've got. They don't give a shit about anybody else. They just give a shit about themselves. The satanic mindset, self-preservation, got no morals. The part of the brain that has moral reasoning doesn't work in them. Moral relativism, self-preservation. They are firmly in the coop, in the hierarchy of the chicken coop. They love the coop files. That's what they want to do. They want to just step on the fellow man or woman just to get higher up the pecking order. They don't have any empathy. Empathy towards others is a deep understanding and sensitivity to the emotions and experiences of those around them. These people don't have any understanding or sensitivity towards their own emotions, let alone anybody else. Empathy is more than just understanding another's perspective. It's about connecting with their emotions, sharing in their experiences, and responding with kindness and compassion. It signals a depth of character that goes beyond superficial displays of class. But everybody wants the class, the hierarchy, the coop. They don't give a shit about anybody else. Ultimately, they don't give a shit about themselves, but embracing simplicity. Life is not about owning the most expensive. Excuse me. Life is not about owning the most expensive things or leading an extravagant lifestyle. Instead, it's about appreciating the simple, understated, and meaningful aspects of life. Whether it's a minimalist approach to fashion, a preference for quality over quantity, or finding joy in simple pleasures. Embracing simplicity signals a high level of sophistication. You'll find that the more you become this type of person, the more they actually function as a proper human, and you realize you know, that you've got so many people around you who are locked into the material world, into the primitive ways of thinking of ego, of the reptilian brain and the emotions, and you start to actually realize that you can't surround yourself with these people because they do drag you down, and you start to have a clear out, for want of a better phrase, just like you would clear out your wardrobe, and you keep just the quality, whatever's quality in there over quantity, and you do that with people in your social circles. Get rid of the tat, and you'll maintain a higher level of consciousness when you surround yourself with people at that same level, at the human level, and you'll start to attract people who resonate with that frequency, and you'll see your life change. Simplicity, quality over quantity. People in the reptilian brain, in the mammalian brain, they are not attracted to people like me. When I say attracted, I mean as in, you know, a connection. They don't like authenticity, real self-confidence, self-assurance, and you know, all of these qualities that you give off. The people don't like it. They're not attracted to it. They're attracted to ego and material world, the hierarchy, the arguing so you can shout the loudest, ridicule, no consideration for other people's emotions or experiences, just Neanderthal banter. Consistent respectfulness. Sophisticated individuals show consistent respectfulness regardless of who they are dealing with. No class, no social Darwinism. They treat the CEO and the janitor with equal dignity and kindness. This habit not only signals class, but it also reflects a deep-seated belief in the inherent worth of every individual. Truly sophisticated people understand that everybody has a unique story and perspective, each deserving of respect. As I've said there, this is the exact opposite to social Darwinism, the third tenet of Satanism. Oh, excuse me. People, you can see this everywhere. They only want to surround themselves with people that they see on their level, or possibly slightly higher, because they see themselves as climbing the social Darwinism ladder, climbing the hierarchy of the chicken coop. They don't want to associate with what they see as a lesser individual. And at the end of the day, there's nothing in true wisdom is reserved for the upper classes, the higher class. You know, you don't buy wisdom. True knowledge and wisdom can be found. You know, a homeless person on the streets could teach you true knowledge and wisdom. Lifelong learning, the quest for knowledge, the curiosity to understand new concepts, and the openness to continually grow. These are the hallmarks of a truly sophisticated individual. This lifelong learning is the total opposite to know-it-all arrogance. So we mentioned earlier that it can be inner conflict when the brains disagree. Let's have a brief look at that. One of the most profound insights of the triune brain model is that our three brains don't always agree. In fact, they can conflict regularly, creating emotional tension and confusion. For example, you know smoking is bad for your health. Obviously that's your neocortex telling you that. But you light a cigarette out of habit, which is the reptilian brain when you're doing something out of habit. And you feel comforted, which is the limbic system. You want to forgive someone logically, neocortex, but emotionally you still feel wounded, which is the limbic system. You plan to start a diet on Monday, neocortex, but you reach for the chocolate cake when stressed, reptilian and limbic habit, and it makes you feel good. So that last one, you can definitely understand why some people do things which they know is not good for them. Well, they all are really, aren't they? You know things aren't good for you, but you do them out of habit and it makes you feel good. So I'm just going to ignore what you say, because that doesn't make us feel good. Because people like to, inner conflict is not comfortable, obviously. So the easiest way to avoid any discomfort is to just ignore something that doesn't sit right with them. I'm just going to ignore that. Doesn't make us feel good. Like, somebody could just ignore that smoking is bad for you. You could just lie to yourself it's not. Understanding this internal struggle helps explain self-sabotage, irrational fears, emotional overreactions, and why some decisions feel so hard. It's not that you're broken, it's that different layers of your brain are pulling in opposite directions. So self-sabotage is seen this a lot recently in my wife's workplace, where people just do things which they know it's going to get them into huge amounts of trouble at work, and do them anyway, to the point where I think they've been suspended or even lost their job. They must know it's wrong. They know it's going to get them into serious trouble, but the ego tells them, you're right, don't let them do that, don't let them win, you know best. Emotional intelligence and the triune brain. True emotional intelligence involves learning how to coordinate and balance the three brains. Self-awareness, recognizing when emotion or impulse is hijacking logic. Self-regulation, using the neocortex to soothe the limbic system or calm reptilian reactivity. Empathy, using your limbic system and neocortex together to connect with others emotionally and intellectually. Therapies such as mindfulness and somatic therapy aim to restore harmony among these layers, calming the reptilian response, healing the limbic system, and activating the neocortex for empowered conscious living. Conscious living, so it's all empowered by the neocortex. And that's emotional intelligence in a nutshell. So let's look at how trauma affects the three brains. Trauma, especially early life trauma, emotional neglect, I'm going to hammer that home, emotional neglect can cause dysregulation in this system. In many cases, the limbic and reptilian brains remain on high alert, perceiving threats everywhere, even when there is none. This results in hypervigilance or emotional numbness. Hypervigilance or emotional numbness. This is something I experienced recently when I was having a confrontation with somebody, which I'm not going to, other than to say they were wrong and I was right. And I believed my reaction was appropriate for the transgression on my boundaries. So in this confrontation, I was pretty harsh in some of the things I said, and and there was no hypervigilance from this person, i.e., why did they end up transgressing? Why did they end up breaking my physical and personal boundaries? Well, there was no hypervigilance, but there was emotional numbness. When I verbally attacked, well, I verbally attacked them, but I was technically defending myself. Emotional numbness was, I could not, it was like I was speaking to a rock, literally. And it wasn't calmness. It wasn't somebody just trying to stay calm in a time of high emotions. It was numbness. So how do people become so emotionally numb? Trauma, hypervigilance. That's it's one or the other. Or it can be one or the other. It's just apathy. Emotional numbness is just like apathy, isn't it? Hypervigilance, see that as well. Anxiety, panic attacks, or dissociation, i.e., they have dissociated from their true self, their true self-awareness, their awareness of who they really are. They are awareness. They've dissociated away from that, and they are now their ego. Difficulty trusting others or forming relationships. It's like people with abandonment issues, isn't it? Where they've been traumatized, abandoned, emotionally abandoned during childhood, neglected. They have difficulty trusting others in their adult life. They almost start pushing them away when something's too good. It must be too good to be true. This can't be happening because I'm so used to being abandoned, and they'll start actually being nasty or mean to these people, and that's the trouble forming relationships, and that's why they're doing it, because they don't trust themselves, don't trust other people. Inability to make clear, logical decisions under stress. definitely see a lot of that around. Reacting to stress. Obviously, the government and the media love putting out fear-based, stressful messages, and people don't think clearly and logically to these things. They just have an emotional reaction and they run with the first thought that comes in their fucking head.
There is an element of mystery which puzzles many people in my view.
Seeking for truth, you have to be very careful what you say.
We regret if the implications of what you've seen are less than optimistic for the future of life on this planet. It has been our task, however, to present the facts as we understand them.
So, spoke about emotional neglect. So that's considered a form of trauma, as it can have a long-lasting and profound effect on a person's emotional and psychological well-being. So imagine emotional neglect on a child. That's going to have a profound effect on their well-being and their development, and they need to develop validation, or they need to be validated and develop a secure sense of self, otherwise they will abandon that self. This form of neglect can occur when a caregiver is not present, but when they are present, they are emotionally unavailable. If the parent is ill-equipped to handle childhood emotions, or if the parent is purposefully dismissive. Emotional neglect is considered a form of trauma, as it can have a long-lasting and profound effects on a person's emotional and psychological well-being. Chronic emotional neglect can shape our emotional landscape as adults by affecting our self-esteem or self-worth and impacting our interpersonal relationships. So again, imagine what it's doing to a child. Ongoing childhood emotional neglect is a form of child abuse and can lead to lasting trauma. This trauma can make it hard to develop healthy relationships with others and with ourselves, our true selves, our sense of self, our self-worth, our awareness, our consciousness, our true self, not our ego. That's not a healthy relationship. If you think your ego is yourself, you've got a relationship with your ego. We might even engage in self-sabotaging behaviours. Some parents emotionally neglect their children because they're uncomfortable with emotions in general and are unsure how to respond to complex feelings a child experiences. They're not complex though, they're not complex. If you've matured into a healthy, functioning human being, they're not complex. Because you've matured to a point where you understand them. Yeah, children are complex little people. I get that, but what I'm saying is this shouldn't be that difficult. It's only difficult if you're, as I've said, if you're uncomfortable with emotions in general, because you've never matured, because you've never learned about your own emotions, what they mean and what other people's mean, and you don't understand it. You like to become emotionally void, as I was talking about earlier. Other parents are too overwhelmed with the stress of their own life, including struggles with addiction, work-life balance, child rearing and mental health issues. Parents who experienced abuse or neglect themselves may be more likely to neglect their own children. So, pattern, repeat, rinse, repeat, rinse, repeat, rinse. So, if you've been brought up by a vacant parent, vacant as in they're not emotionally present, then obviously you won't be nurtured in the right way. You won't develop. You won't develop into a fully functioning human. And when you have children, you quite frankly won't have those skills and those tools to be able to and be present for your children, and you just think it's normal because it's what you're used to. You think that's normal. People are conditioned to think that their experience is the norm. Liars, for example, compulsive pathological liars, believe that everybody lies. So if you're brought up in a household, a dysfunctional household where neither parents are present emotionally, then you just think that's normal. Punishment for expressing ways of neglecting your children's needs. Punishment for expressing negative emotions like sadness, frustration or anger. For example, being told to go to your room to be quiet. You're just being belittled. You're just belittling the child. You're hammering out any sense of self-worth. They're going to abandon their true self. Lack of shared celebration or joy when experiencing a positive emotion like happiness or excitement. It might even present as zapping the positive emotion with a negative response. I still see that in parents of a certain generation. They can't be happy for their kids. Baby boomer parents can't be happy for their Generation X kids. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter what age you get to, right? These fucked up parents who I've personally got myself, in-laws and my own. What they don't get, because they're so fucking retarded, what they don't get is your child, son or daughter, never ever stops wanting to impress you and have your love and affection and for you to be proud of them. Are you getting it now? Fucking hell. Lack of shared celebration or joy when experiencing a positive emotion. Instead, they're jealous and envious. But obviously, at a younger age, this goes on. The kid needs to have all of their feelings and emotions validated, because they are valid. And then children who aren't given this validation turn into adults. Well, they turn into physical adults, and then they go out and act in the world the way that we've been talking about, with no empathy, no human connection. Being told your feelings or experiences aren't valid or worth further examination. You're too sensitive, for example. Stop acting like a baby, or don't worry about it. When you're told not to, at a certain age, when you're told you're too sensitive, or you're acting like a baby, or don't worry about it, you're just being diminished. And you're just being taught that your feelings and your emotions aren't worthy. So you're going to turn into one of those numb people, apathetic. Parents dismissing or ignoring the feelings of the child because they're focused on themselves or another situation. Focused on themselves, like, whoa, wait, I need to put this post. I need to put this post on Facebook of my tea. Your emotions and your feelings can wait, can't they, Tommy? Or wait, I'm watching television. Your emotions and your feelings can wait, can't they, Tommy? Because that box in the corner there, that idiot box, that's the God in this house, and that's the hierarchy. That's what I worship. Everything comes second to that television, Tommy. You're way down the pecking order. You don't matter. or you know, handing them a child off, a toddler, to a child trauma centre to be reared by a stranger while they go off to maintain the lifestyle of their luxury cars. Excuse me. Is just putting yourself before your kid. Kid doesn't want a fucking luxury 4x4. Get that through your head. A kid doesn't want a luxury 4x4. You want a luxury 4x4. Withhold. The message to the kid is this piece of metal is more important than me nurturing you, looking after you, being ever present in your life. I'm going to hand you off, and I'm going to abandon you to this group of strangers, even when you scream and you're in obvious distress. I'm just going to walk away. Because that's the best way I can deal with it, is by pretending it's not happening, and then I go to work, feel better. Withholding or not showing affection, whether it is explicitly requested or not. As I know many women who still don't get affection from their mothers. You should always get affection from your parents. That dynamic should never go away. And my point is, these parents must have been fucked up when they were brought up. They've got nothing. They've got no affection to give. And this is very common. I would say it's very common. I know several women who are obviously adults, and they get no affection, love and affection from their mothers, and it's particularly sad because, you know, the mother-daughter bond should be sacred. Failure to intervene or find a solution in situations when a child is under emotional stress. See, it's not rocket science how to bring up a child, how to give them the basic needs, physically and emotionally. It's not rocket science, but it takes a lot of effort, doesn't it? Excuse me. Not acknowledging difficult emotions like grief after losing a pet or embarrassment after being bullied. Often because the parent struggles to recognise or process these emotions themselves. They don't know how to deal with it because they're children themselves. I had a very close family member who recently went through some grief. I'll not divulge any names to protect the guilty. A very close family member went through some serious grief recently, and when they were had a period of having a few tears, they walked back into the room where their mother was, and obviously it was clear that they had been crying, red eyes, and what you know what it looks like when someone's been crying. And the mother just said, "What's wrong with you?" Totally cold, callous. "What's wrong with you?" And when they said, "Well, I've just had a moment over Joe Bloggs, who's I'm just had a moment." It was just, that was the reaction. Why? Why? It was completely. It wasn't just not acknowledged. It was actually degraded. And that's their mother. This is a close family member. It's my sick, dysfunctional, fucked up family. Not my immediate family. Not my wife, soulmate, and a little beacon of hope known as my daughter. Not us three. The wider family, completely fucked up. Ongoing neglect is child abuse. Ongoing emotional neglect can affect a child's development. Trauma can cause changes in the brain and nervous system that in turn lead to difficulty expressing emotions, lower self-esteem or self-worth, shame and guilt. People rooted in shame and guilt, people who have difficulty expressing emotions, or they're emotionally, I'm forgetting the phrase I was using before, emotionally completely, there's nothing there, dulled, low self-esteem or low self-worth. And when you've got low self-worth, and if you abandon the true self, and if you start to identify with the ego, then the only reason you can build self-esteem, the only way you can build self-esteem is by outward external validation and material worth. Obviously that's not really self-esteem, it's pride, dysfunctional pride. Surround yourself with material wealth and having external validation, needing external validation. It's not real self-esteem. Self-esteem is self-worth. It's knowing that everybody is equal, everybody is unique, everybody has their own story, and everybody deserves respect. Children suffering from the trauma of neglect can have behavioural issues at home and in school, and may struggle to form and maintain relationships in childhood and as adults. So, behavioural issues, I mean, they just call that things like ADHD now, don't they? They give all of these behavioural issues fancy names, and then it gives the child an excuse as to why they're behaving this way, and it also gives the parents an excuse as to why they're behaving in a certain way. And then in adult life, the adult, or the physical adult, is still actually a child, no older than 12. No, in terms of maturity and development, no older than 12. And then they're an adult, physical adult, and then their poor behaviours continue. And then they're given, oh, you might have, you might be on the spectrum, or you might be neurodiverse, or whatever other bullshit they want to come up with to just cover up people who are fucking got arrested development. And there's not everybody, obviously. Some people do have genuine mental issues. I'm talking about people that jump on the bandwagon, and they're given these excuses and they'll use them. The people who lack empathy, who will happily lie to get their own way, who don't care about anybody else, who are selfish, which is all we're describing here. they will happily lie to give an excuse for their bad behaviour, because remember, they don't take personal responsibility. It's not me, I was born this way. You weren't born that way. Nobody's born a fucking idiot. Nobody's born without empathy. There might, very, 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 very small number of cases where people are born with some sort of mental defect where they can't develop a full range of emotions and they can't develop empathy. Very, very, very minute number of people born as a psychopath because they probably had some sort of trauma during, during pregnancy. So I'm forgetting where I was. So remember that these people who behave like children, who behave purely from the reptilian brain and the emotional mind, are they have arrested development, and their mental age is no more than 12, and they can't express emotions, show emotional numbness, have low self-esteem, dressed up as arrogance or dysfunctional pride, and they are rooted in shame and guilt. They don't show any shame and guilt because through the neglect and through the trauma, they've become shameful individuals, and they can't deal with guilt and shame, so they have to obviously they identify with the ego, and the ego is perfect. The ego never feels shame or guilt, so they don't have to experience shame or guilt because they've abandoned the true self. The true self, which through their abuse, through the neglect, and through the trauma, the true self, the messaging was, you're not good enough, you're not good enough, you're not good enough, you're not good enough, you're not good enough. That creates a shameful sense of self and a guilty sense of self. So that true self has to be locked away and abandoned forever. Dissociation, new identity called the ego. My thoughts, my emotions, my physical body, everything is identification with the ego. And the self-esteem, the ego can only get self-esteem by more of the 4 F's, more of the material world, more money, more social status, more. The ego is never satisfied. And that's not self-esteem, that's dysfunctional pride. They have no self-esteem because they have no self. They have no self-reflection because they have no self. It's been locked away. They don't want to see. They don't want to get that. They don't want to get that shameful, guilty individual out of the cupboard, out of the dungeon. They don't want to self-reflect at that. They can't cope with it. So they've locked away the ability to feel shame and guilt. That's why they're shameless and guiltless. They're perfect. They never, ever, ever feel those two emotions. And that's why you'll see these people acting without remorse, without any guilt, without any shame. If you've got no shame, how many people do you see on social media acting like they've got no shame? Because they're children. Children act like they've got no shame. How childhood emotional neglect can show up in our adult life. Difficulty expressing and processing emotions. There might also be a general sense of numbness. Again, touched on that. Which is ultimately a form of self-protection. They may choose to leave a relationship or situation instead of asking for something they need because they feel safer than the risk of rejection, the fear of abandonment. Emotional numbness. They don't want to feel these emotions because it's too traumatic. I don't think they can't deal with them because they're a child. People-pleasing tendencies. They might end up becoming the caretaker or burden holder of friends and family. Somebody very close to me is the surrogate parent. They took on the surrogate parent of the role in the dysfunctional family. They carry the burden of the family and all of the pressure is on them, and that is carried on into adult life, and it's difficult to shake. They want to be the caretaker for everybody. It's not good for yourself, but people pleasing is delusional. You can't keep everybody happy. Essentially, and when I say people pleasing, I'm going to separate that from the caretaker role because there's two different versions. There's the caretaker where, or the burden holder, where you just want to help and fix everybody's problems and you end up putting yourself second. People pleasing, and there's a people pleasing tendency which is just agreeing with everybody, where you become such a hypocrite and you never challenge anybody because you're a coward, and you'll agree with somebody if they say the sky is blue. Yeah, it is. I believe the sky is blue. And then you'll turn, 2 minutes later, you'll be speaking to someone else who believes the sky is green. And yeah, I believe the sky is green. Because you can't have any confrontation in your life. So I see that as different to being a caretaker, trying to fix people's problems. Essentially, addressing other people's emotions and needs allows us to feel worthy, loved, needed, and good enough. This can backfire if we end up focusing so much on others that we fail to prioritise ourselves. Exactly, constantly putting yourself second. Now, there's somebody that I know that has this kind of caretaker behaviour. I know a bit about their background, about their dysfunctional family, and they definitely went through a childhood experience of not feeling worthy, not feeling good enough, not feeling loved or needed. So it's showing up in the adult life because it's a habit. It's a habit that they're trying to feel the things that they should have felt like that as a child, and then they wouldn't be doing this now to the detriment of themselves in the adult life. Hard time trusting other people. Covered this briefly, I think, earlier. Sometimes it feels safer to put up walls so that no one else can get in and potentially hurt us. We're simply trying to protect ourselves. So if we've experienced pain in the past, we might end relationships the moment we feel threatened, or avoid relationships completely. Some people might even self-sabotage their relationships to avoid feeling abandoned, rejected, or neglected. Putting up walls, it's a lack of trust. Don't let anybody in, and ultimately, what's behind it is because the trauma. What the message was during the neglect and the trauma was, you're not to be trusted, little child. You're not good enough, and you're not to be trusted. I just can't trust you. You can't trust yourself. So what they do is they can't trust themselves, so they can't trust anybody else. You can't trust somebody else if you don't trust yourself. It has to start within. You have to have confidence, self-esteem and trust in your own abilities to actually trust somebody else. That's how you ask for help. That's how you ask for help, even if it's just on a physical level, or even with a problem, solving a problem or whatever. You ask for help because you trust people. But if you don't trust yourself, then you can't trust anybody else. Low self-esteem, self-worth. I much prefer the term self-worth. Childhood neglect can often cause people to have low self-worth. If our self-esteem is low, we might write off our own emotions or even let people walk all over us. Yeah, no boundaries. Low self-esteem may also cause struggles with self-compassion and self-love. No boundaries, walkovers, people who are ripe to be abused again, because that's what they're used to, because they have been abused. They're used to having no boundaries. They're familiar with the abuse. They have no self-respect, self-worth. They have no courage to put up boundaries and stick to them. And when I say abuse, they're used to being abused, I mean just being taken advantage of, not respected, not validated, not seen as an equal. Coping mechanisms. So if you see any of these, it normally means, these are coping mechanisms with people who suffer from these types of effects. Becoming codependent on people who aren't good for them, or showing people-pleasing behaviours to keep people around. It's just fear of abandonment. And codependency, I need somebody to please. I need somebody to give and have no boundaries with. And what happens is they become codependent with people who are completely opposite, completely sort of selfish and take. People who abuse them, take it for granted. i.e. narcissists, sociopaths, psychopaths, borderline personality disorders. All these sorts of personality disorders show up, and they're kind of attracted to each other. People pleasers. The two types of people who, it's not just two types of people, but the types of people that come out of these dysfunctional families, dysfunctional upbringings, become attracted to one another, codependent, people pleasers, and takers, narcissists. It can show up as addiction. Coping mechanisms can be addictions to shopping, pornography, online usage, risky sex, food, hoarding, shopping. How many people, I mean, they even call it shopping therapy, don't the people? Well, how is it therapy? It's not therapy. It's a coping mechanism. Porn. How many young people are addicted to porn, I wonder? How many middle-aged men are addicted to porn? Because it's the, it's part of the 4 F's. It's satisfies your desires, your short-term desires, and the material world, and that part of the brain that that's the therapy. It's therapy for your ego, for your reptilian mind. Online usage, escapism, risky sex, risky sex, just what was strange. It could be with strangers, someone you just met and you don't really know them, or it could be, having affairs. You're not faithful to one partner, and obviously it's risky being unfaithful, but you take that risk anyway. You become, all of it's just like more food. I want more food, I want more sex, I want more online usage, I want more porn, I want more shopping, and hoarding, which is all this is. It's just hoarding, including friends. How many friends can I have on social media? Collect friends, you never know when you might need them. Hoarding. Rather than the simplistic, clutter-free life, as we mentioned earlier. Parts of the brain impacted by trauma. The limbic system. The assessment of threat-related stimuli. For example, assessing what in the environment is considered a danger. The formation and storage of emotional memories. Fear conditioning. Memory consolidation. So the trauma, having past traumas and living in a trauma-based system can affect how you assess danger, how you store emotional memories, your fear conditioning, memory consolidation, the hippocampus also is where you store long-term memories, basically helping to decide what goes from being a short-term memory to what becomes a long-term memory. This process of turning short-term memory into long-term memory is what is referred to as memory consolidation. Excuse me. Damage to the hippocampus can also release excess cortisol, stress. High cortisol levels lead to heightened alertness, stress and fear. This is what a lot of these people are. Super vigilant, heightened alertness, live in a stressful world, and live in a fear-based survival instinct lifestyle. The processing of turning short-term memory into long-term memory, how many people can't remember 2020? I had a conversation with two people just the other day. Both didn't know what year it was. The nonsense, the psyop. These weren't people that they weren't referring it to as nonsense and a psyop. These were normie people, if you like. But neither could remember. When was it again? 2022. So, short-term memory into long-term memory, that the ability to do that is impacted by trauma. Half the people can't remember. They just can't remember things, important things. The neocortex, how is it impacted by trauma? Emotional regulation, initiating voluntary conscious behaviours, regulating attention, decision making, interpreting emotions. So again, there's clearly a trauma element to this. There's clearly something that stems from childhood, and there's clearly there's clearly something easily recognizable in a vast number of people where they actually behave like a child, and they can't do any of these functions that the human brain is renowned for performing. And the impacts of trauma definitely seems to be a conclusion that you can rationally come to. The right inferior frontal gyrus, this is involved in modulating risk aversion. Spoke about that earlier. The idea that people like that take no risks. No. Whatever's safe, stay safe, follow the crowd, conformity. The brain's response to trauma. When the amygdala perceives a threat, it communicates this information to other brain regions, such as the hypothalamus and brain stem, i.e. the reptile brain, which in turn initiate the physiological changes associated with the fight or flight response. This includes increased heart rate, dilation of blood vessels to increase blood flow, and the release of stress hormones from the adrenal glands. The prefrontal cortex acts as a braking system that helps return the body to normal state when you realize that the threat doesn't pose a danger or after the threat has passed. So obviously the blood flow rushes to the parts of the body which are required for fight or flight, which is obviously the limbs, and it rushes the blood, increases the blood flow away from vital organs that you don't need to fight or run. You don't need the organs for momentarily. You do need them, but you can prioritize your arms and your legs, your muscles, adrenaline, ready to have the strength to run or fight. And that response, it's happening even if you're not faced with a saber-toothed tiger, even if you're just faced with some bit of information which your ego thinks is a threat to your belief system and your fragile, insecure little self, you'll still have that response. It's not normal. So you're still having the rush of blood, pumping the blood away from the vital organs, and that's if you live in a state where you're that easily stressed. What's that going to do to those vital organs? And obviously the prefrontal cortex, as I've said there, is a braking system. It's rational. People, they don't even need to put on the brakes. They wouldn't even have that emotional reaction anyway. Or maybe it's just the brakes are put on extremely quick. When people have symptoms of PTSD, the amygdala becomes hyperactive while the medial prefrontal cortex becomes hypoactive. In other words, the part of the brain that triggers a fight or flight response responds too strongly, often in a way that is disproportionate to the danger posed by the threat. No shit. At the same time, part of the brain responsible for calming this reaction does not work well enough. So, PTSD. So, if we're talking about childhood trauma through neglect, emotional neglect, you don't cure or fix the wound without actually addressing it. You dress a wound, you address a psychological wound. So you're going to have PTSD until it's addressed and fixed, dealt with, properly put behind you. So that's why I believe these people, a lot of people have these hyperactive emotional reactions, and their braking system or their rational thinking is hypoactive. As we've said, the neocortex enables rational thinking, perspective and decision making, especially vital in relationships, parenting and conflict resolution. We are dealing with, in the aggregate, a huge majority of people who are not able to do these things. A fear for their children. Impulsive behaviour. Changes to the right inferior frontal gyrus help to explain why people with PTSD may suddenly engage in high risk activities. So what I'm describing here, what I've described throughout this whole presentation really, these are the characteristics of the walking dead, the NPCs, the unconscious entities walking around allowing our world to be destroyed and our freedoms to be stolen. They are ignorant, arrogant, lack real intelligence and are easily mind controlled, manipulated and fooled. They are driven by their ego and or emotions without rationale or reason, and they believe that their ego is actually them or their true self. They are so arrogant and egocentric that they do not believe that they could ever be fooled or duped, because they simply believe that they are right, period. Because their trauma stems from abuse, not only was their psychological, spiritual development stunted, but they are familiar with the cycle of abuse and the abuse victim roleplay. In other words, the government abuse victim roleplay. They love the servitude because it's familiar, and you know that's what their brains are only capable of dealing with. The coop, the pecking order. They are mental and spiritual children trapped in a grown-up body. Like children, they do not have the courage to recognize there is a problem and change themselves and grow. A child never looks inward. It hasn't developed yet. That's not. It's nothing. It's not an insult to children. It's just these adults are trapped maximum age 12. So, healing the wound. Making the effort to heal this wound is a sign of bravery and can be done at any age. You can go back at any age and actually address these wounds, and then you might actually be able to have the courage to recognize why you've been so retarded in your thinking, and actually recognize a problem, realize why you've been stunted, and put the effort in and the self-reflection to change and grow. So in order to explore the abuser-victim cycle, so that's what I've been talking about here, is these people who haven't fully matured and developed into a fully functioning adult human have been neglected, and for whatever reason that neglect was there, they've in a dysfunctional family, they've gotten used to what is effectively an abuser victim cycle, and they've developed that abuser victim mentality, and it stems from the fact that they're not functioning properly with the human brain. So they're in tribalism. All of the behaviors of the reptilian mind, tribal, territorial, choose your side, you've got to be right, you've got to pick a, this is classic divide and conquer, but this is how it plays out inside the mind. You just choose a side and you've got to be right, got to be right, got to be right, and you'll just believe anything you want, and you'll quite happily, as long as you win, you'll quite happily see the other side as the victims, and because you now feel powerful. It's like being bullied. You take on the role of the bully. Be the bully or be the bullied. That's what the message is here. Be the abuser or be the victim. It's your choice. They see the world as those two simple choices, and they obviously they see the world in that way. And when it comes to the government and the system, then it's an abusive system. They abuse us, and people are quite happy to be the victim because they're of low consciousness, they've got low self-worth, and they haven't got the courage to do anything about it. They just take it like a good little victim. And as long as they get somewhere in the hierarchy, somewhere in the pecking order that they're happy with, so they can abuse people beneath them, then they're not bothered. It is dog eat dog. That's the dog eat dog world. We live in the survival basic instinct world that we live in, and this is why. It's because they've got arrested development, and until you actually have the courage to change yourself, then nothing else is going to change. We deserve the abuser system that we have. We deserve it because we're doing nothing to change ourselves collectively in the aggregate. So in order to explore the abuser-victim cycle, I'm going to look at the Hawkins scale of consciousness, a logarithmic scale developed by Dr. David Hawkins that measures different levels of consciousness from 20 to 1000, with higher levels indicating greater psychological integration and harmony with life. It serves as a framework to understand personal growth and spiritual development, or self-esteem, self-worth, the real self, awareness, spiritual development. The scale, or consciousness, the scale categorizes various psychological and emotional states, with higher levels indicating great awareness and spiritual growth. Your awareness is what is above everything, above the physical domain, above your body, above your thoughts, above your emotions, above anything is your awareness. Application of the scale. The scale serves as a tool for individuals to assess their emotional and spiritual states. It suggests that as one progresses to higher levels, they experience increased happiness and fulfillment. What, like more freedom? And so, you know, that the higher you progress, put your barriers, your boundaries up, build your self-esteem, build your self-worth, and you'll attract people with similar levels of self-worth, and you'll have an increased happiness and fulfillment in your life. The scale is not a definitive measure, but rather a framework to understand personal growth and consciousness evolution. We need to evolve our consciousness before we evolve as a species. Otherwise, we're just going to be trapped in the abuser-victim cycle. Because that's what we're used to, because that's how we're being brought up. And for some reason we're happy with it because we're just lying to ourselves. So let's have a quick look at this map of consciousness now. The column I'm going to focus on is the one that says level at the top. So it's got enlightenment at the top and shame at the bottom. Now remember what I said about guilt and shame. People who are rooted in guilt and shame because of their own trauma, and they display apathy, emotional numbness, apathy. Grief is down there. Obviously when you're experiencing grief, it's understandable. You know, it's a lower vibration, a lower level of consciousness, but it's required. Fear is down there. Fear is not all bad. Sometimes it's required. Desire. Remember what we said about desire. Short-term desire over long-term fulfillment. Anger. Remember what we said about anger? A way of just dominating an argument. Just pure anger. Pride. Remember pride, where we talked about dysfunctional pride, which is not self-esteem. Things like material worth, money, material possessions, likes on Facebook, external validation. It's dysfunctional pride. And this is where the line is. This is the line between force and power, or the weak and the strong, is courage, between pride and courage. And that is where you raise your level of consciousness to actually start experiencing the emotions. There's trust. See how trust is there? Forgiveness, understanding, reverence, optimism. Well, look at all the lower ones. Scorn. People that love scorn and they love hating. Anxiety's down there. Blame, humiliation. So once you have the courage to actually walk away from people who drag you down, or the courage to recognize your own weaknesses, because you are a weak individual. Once you have the courage to recognize the error of your own ways, you might actually start to climb the ladder of the quality of your thoughts, the quality of your emotions, your awareness, your understanding, your empathy. Everything that we've spoken about comes above the line of courage. Where pride, people, they think that's the end. They think they've got that pride, that dysfunctional pride, they've got the material possessions, they've got that arrogance, and they think they know it all. They attach themselves to their ego, they think the material world is all there is, and that's where they stay. They never come out. They're weak individuals. They're not strong. Everything feels like a force down there. You're trying to force change. You're trying to force people to get to see your way. It's like, God, it's like the vampires. It's like you come away and you say, I can't deal with that anymore. Whereas the strong have power. Not power as in dominance, power as in it's just standing in your own power, feeling like a really powerful person, as in, you know, your own power. We've all got our own power and our own, you know, will to make change and to actually improve our level of consciousness, grow and be a better person. We have the power to do that. It feels very empowering to be surrounded by people who all resonate at similar levels of consciousness, generally speaking. Yeah, you can dip down into the weak levels every now and again, especially if people drag you down there. That's where, you know, that think of this saying, or they just drag us down, they suck the life out of us. It's very heavy down there, very, very heavy. Up here, it's very light. In this map, it's the same thing, but it's just a slightly different way of expressing it. Look here, victim, abuser, consciousness. So all of these elements are in the third dimension, 3D, three-dimensional people. Pride, anger, desire, fear, grief, apathy, guilt, shame, rooted in shame. In hell or purgatory, a constant state of suffering. These people they are suffering. They are suffering because the highest level of consciousness that they can maintain in the lower ego self, because they identify with the ego, they have not taken on through courage the act of self-empowerment. They are happy being the victim or abuser, and that's where they are. The highest level they can get is pride, dysfunctional pride. Pride comes before the fall, and they fall right back down to guilt and shame. And this is the victim abuser cycle of consciousness. They can never get any higher than pride, hubris, haughty behaviours, and they always end up with a fall. And that's where humanity is, constantly in this cycle. We need to have the courage to walk away, to put up boundaries, and to actually stop lying to ourselves and stop doing the things which keep us in this victim abuser cycle of government. That's the first thing that we need to stop doing and recognize the hell. So here's another depiction of the Hawkins scale, which shows the difference between the two levels, one being love, one being fear, the two states of consciousness. You don't manifest or attract or create anything good in the state of fear. You have to be in the realm of love expanded consciousness versus contracted consciousness. Think about when you're around these people, they're in this level of suffering. It is like they're just getting by in life. Even if they've got everything material wise, they're never happy. They're not happy people. They're just getting by. And it does feel like a very contracted state of consciousness. Contracted as in just really, really restricted and difficult. There's no expansion. There's no room for maneuver. And just to also highlight that the abuse cycle consciousness, victim abuser consciousness, suffering, people in this level of consciousness, down in the third dimension, lower ego self of suffering, they're not fully aware of the suffering, because they've disassociated and they've bought the lie that they've been sold, i.e. they've sold themselves the lie that they are their ego. They've bought the lie that the dysfunctional family is actually a functional family, a loving family. It's none of the sort. They've bought the lie that, you know, the neglect and the abuse that they've suffered in the past is normal. And then anybody who is then later trapped, they might not be, they might be, generally speaking, people pleasers. They haven't developed and matured. They haven't got self-esteem, and then if they end up in another victim abuser relationship, and all that means is not physical abuse necessarily, but just emotional abuse, continuation of emotional neglect. Even as an adult, we still need these things, and it'll still have impacts along the lines of what we've been talking about, and it'll still cause some sort of trauma. But people in these relationships have bought the lie. So if you're in a codependent relationship, the person who is the abused or the victim, they have bought the lie that this is a loving relationship, and nobody can snap them out of that, because you go up to one of these people and say you're actually being emotionally neglected, emotionally abused, they'll attack you. They'll protect their abuser because they've bought the lie. They've bought the lie that this is a loving relationship. How dare you? And that cognitive dissonance, the ego, what they've bought, the ego's bought it. And the true self, the true awareness, the true consciousness, the true spirit of the person has been abandoned, and the ego is in charge, and they're going to protect what they believe. The love, the servitude, the love, the hell. And that's why, until we actually grow up and actually grow out of this lower ego self childish mentality, we're just going to stay trapped in the third dimension in terms of the macro level of where we are is a civilization. We're going to end up victim abuser cycle with the government as the abuser, either your mammy government, your mammy figure, the nanny state who spoils you like a child, and you can never stand on your own 2 feet, and you're lazy and you just want things for nothing. And that emotional abuse where you're constantly told you're not good enough, and the daddy, you know, and it's very covert, or the overt abuse by the daddy government who has strict controls and strict totalitarian, overt totalitarian abuse. That's the two, but they're both abusive. What the covert, pretending to look after your needs, versus the overt, you know, literally living in a totalitarian, overtly totalitarian regime. That's where we're going if we don't get out of this pathetic state of consciousness. So the conclusion is, that was the other thing I was going to say, was what the nanny state does to anybody who's even somewhere near a functioning, mature adult. If they get used to the nanny state, i.e. get used to being mothered and smothered and all the rest of it, and not allowed to stand on their own 2 feet, think for themselves and all the rest of it, they do also eventually develop a infantile personality, mindset, and you know, so they can be susceptible to going, you know, being more deeply trapped in the victim abuser cycle. Those trapped in the abuser cycle of consciousness are unlikely to awaken their true self, the spirit, the consciousness, the awareness. They love being unaware, unconscious, ego self. The highs they can attain is dysfunctional pride, which they foolishly think is self-esteem or self-worth, and pride always comes before the fall, back down to shame. This is the constant cycle that these people are in, and in the aggregate, that's where we're being kept as well. Constant abuse cycle. They do not possess the true courage to escape the abuse cycle of government. So that all that's coming in is just going to be something new is going to be offered to these people that think that they're making a difference, and then they'll just get a new abuser. And it's they'll go into that, they'll build up this movement, this right-wing movement that's happening, and they'll become prideful, and they'll develop hubris, they'll develop haughtiness and tribalism, and they'll get some sort of dysfunctional pride, which they see as fake self-esteem, collectively, when they win the next election or what have you. And then there'll come a fall, because they'll go straight back down to guilt and shame when they realise that they've completely fucked it up and they've been shat on yet again. They don't learn from the cycle of abuse. They do not possess the true courage to escape the abuse cycle of governments. Their ego has created a false self, and they have abandoned their true self long ago. This is a protection mechanism due to trauma and abuse as a child. They have literally lost their mind. They think they are their mind, their thoughts, their emotions. They think that's them because they've lost their mind. Their true self is their spirit or their consciousness or their awareness. which they abandoned many, many years ago. We must not waste our time on these people. They are the soulless living dead who live in a state of fear. That's the fear state that they're in. Everywhere from shame to pride. They're shameless and guiltless because they can't cope with those emotions. Because that would mean bringing out the true self to deal with that trauma that they can't address. That's their concrete thinking. There to protect their past traumas, creating a shameless person. We must try to reach and influence those who have the courage to change. The zombies will follow. There's only so many people who are going to actually wake up from a contracted state of consciousness and actually expand, open their mind, and actually have the courage to do something, admit what the problem is. We've created this situation and we need to do something to change it. No representative, no government is going to change this. Hell state of suffering. Most people don't even feel the suffering though, because they've got no empathy. They don't care what's happening anywhere as long as it's not happening to them. And quite frankly, even if there was a huge amount of suffering impacting their own children and their own family, I still don't think they'd care. I honestly don't think that they haven't got love for anybody except themselves. Love doesn't exist in the contracted state of consciousness. Where is it? It's right up there, right there, high up in expanded consciousness. That's where love is. It's not down in the basement, in the dumps with all the dregs of society, hang out, suffering, getting by, angry, fear-driven desires, dysfunctional pride, apathy. We need to find people who actually have the courage to change and influence those. The zombies will follow. They'll just go along to get along. How many people have the courage to change? Very few. 15% maybe. We're going to finish with this quote from The Stellar Man by John Baines. 5 basic points that are the discipline must keep before him in order. 5 basic points that the disciple must keep before him in order to break the phenomenon of hypnotic sleep, unconsciousness. These points are: stop lying to yourself. First and foremost, stop lying to yourself. Stop dreaming. You live in a delusion because you're asleep, you're dreaming. Learn how to think. Actually learn how to think and come to rational conclusions about what's actually going on around you. Live in the present moment. Don't live in the past. Don't live in the future. Live in the present moment. Activate the physical body. Get active. Do something. And just to finish off, just a reminder around the difference between natural law and man's law. I hope that you've enjoyed that presentation. It's been a bit of a long one. My voice just about got through it, but right now I'm feeling a bit pettish, so I'll catch you later.